unhappy with her for that. But she she and I talked yesterday about a potential replacement. So I do intend to bring someone else on in that role for our ESC. And then Magellan is doing their data collection on the infrastructure side and services, and they said they're on track. So that's all the good news. So any questions about that?
Yes. Is anyone else not having the slides advance?
Mine's not advancing.
I
Let me
just
try.
see the cover slide.
I can't see. I can't
All
see
right.
anything at all.
Let me try again because it's
Sarah, I mean, Liza, I have a status on this school if you want that as part of the infrastructure, or when you call on me, just.
okay.
Okay, I'll let you choose when.
All right. Are you seeing the slide down that says announcement?
Yeah.
Okay, so who knows what's going on here today? Okay, so I'm just going to leave it in this mode. I do want to talk about outreach, and you all got this slide deck. It hasn't really changed, but we have started the public outreach, so I want to bring everybody up to speed and talk about where we are and kind of the planning and then what we believe the deliverables will be. The residents, I've said this before, but we are really, really close to being able to release the online residents and business surveys. Magellan wanted to host them because it's typically they had some information they wanted. They do a speed test, etc. The final edits are being made and they're looking great. And I appreciate the folks who've worked on them and provided input. There's been a lot of eyeballs. But since we're asking them to do it a little differently than they normally do, we've had to go back and forth with them some. My hope is, I was hoping we'd post them by tomorrow, but I think it's going to be Monday. Jeff is going to help me follow up with them. But like the business survey, there were just 4 little word changes that they had needed correcting. So we're really close with that. I'm happy to report, Michael, it has started public outreach for government and emergency management community. And Michael, could you just take a couple minutes and talk about it, how you're going with he's doing focus groups and then following up with the survey. And maybe tell us how many you've done. Michael?
Muted.
There. Am I unmuted now?
Mhm.
Am I unmuted? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Today we did fire chiefs and we did city clerks yesterday. And we've got a whole number scheduled for the next over the next month. So we're kicking those off. The challenge for these set monthly meetings like the fire chiefs is, even with only 5 questions, survey questions were asked, by the time you get through the presentation, which take, even going fast, it takes 10 minutes. It doesn't leave much time. The natural flow of a focus group is people feed off on each other, and it's a little awkward in this format where everyone's on the screen. It doesn't necessarily lend it, and particularly if there's more folks than fit on the screen as you're seeing it. So it's a challenge. I think we got some input that's helpful. We're sending out, or I sent out today, the fire sort of follow-up, the same questions in follow-up form. So hopefully we'll get more input there. And I know the clerk one, they were willing to let the conversation go for a full hour versus the half hour. So I think that was helpful on their part. So a lot of it's just being flexible, I would say. But it's gone smoothly. People are more enthusiastic. A little, I think, perplexed at what we're actually not talking about, but we talk about what digital infrastructure is, but actually having a picture of what type of input we want from them is a little hard for folks to get their hands around, but it's going well. That good enough, Liza?
Yes, thank you. And you were cutting out some, or maybe it was just my connection, but I turned on my video to help too. But That's true. And I listened in on the clerks meeting yesterday. So clerks from towns and cities, and Rebecca hosted that. And I thought the meeting went really well. And I felt like we got a lot of good input from not just what they needed and wanted, but things that were going on. I found out some stuff I didn't know about what's going on in Novato. So I really appreciate that it's kicked off. I do like the model for this group, because we're using standing meetings, and we may be doing that too with Elisa's group, transportation, utilities, etc. Having a discussion, being able to talk to them about what we're doing, and then asking a few questions, getting their brains going, and then following up with a survey seems to be a good model. And I'm already getting surveys in because it sends me a little message when the surveys come in. So I wanted that because him to talk just a little bit about that. Michael, thank you, and Rebecca, thank you, because I wondered, like, 5 questions, will we really get input? But we are, and it's going well, and I think that that's a model we can use in a few other places. And
one thing, Liza, could I add?
Mm-hmm.
One other valuable thing to do through these focus groups is ask them to identify individuals that we should interview. And that's also been helpful. So through this work, it's iterative, but we're also identifying individuals that they say, oh, you got to talk to this person or this person over here. And so we're also creating a small list of individuals that we might be able to spend more in-depth time. While some of these focus groups are kind of too many people on them for them all to answer every question in the short amount of time that we have. But again, we're surfacing names and getting contacts with individuals that we can have longer in-depth conversations with.
And we had a fire chief who volunteered to be on our working group after hearing the presentation. He said, I've got a lot of experience in this area. I'd love to help.
Great. Definitely, I think it is helping us find people like that who have experience and who have knowledge. But it's worth that short focus group to be able to bring people up to speed so they're not just being hit blindly by a survey. So I throw that out there. How do we get the message across? The good news is all of the communities now are either doing the outreach, the surveys are about to go out, and in the planning stages. And so I'm not going to go into every one, but I know Javier and I have met, and he's working on his plan. Elise and Rebecca and I met, and we've got a plan there. There's some steps that need to be taken. Ross and I and Sarah met, and I think we have a good plan outlined. Just need to, get some pen to paper there. And so it's very exciting. The interest continues to be high. We continue to get email and people doing outreach and asking questions about it. We're bringing on, and I don't think this was in our news, I had a young man from one of the high schools who is getting his Eagle Scout badge, who wants to work in the project just for his project, work with Digital Marin for his Eagle Scout badge project. And so we'll be talking to him soon. And I know we've talked about students being involved. And so my hope is that he can, help drive some of that student outreach around what they have and what they need. And so that should be really exciting too. Just, you can see some of the other things there that when we do the outreach, the one thing I would stress is the last one, work with Jeff and I, and now Nina will be coming on board more again next week. And then our intern coming in February. Work with us. You're not on your own. We don't want you to do all the heavy lifting. You can be as involved as you can, but we are there to help with organizing meetings, getting the presentation together. We certainly are taking the minutes and doing follow-up. Get your questions. We can create the surveys. All of those things. I don't want it to become so overwhelming that it's difficult to get moving. I do owe Ross. Oh, and Jonathan and I met. Sorry, Jonathan, didn't mean to leave you out. We've got some great ideas there. So I owe a few of you some summaries and to get us started. But please, let us do as much as we can. It's always nice if you show up and make introductions, and you can run meetings or not. It's really up to what you're comfortable with. But it's been very exciting to see the network that we're creating and the collaborations and the discussions that are already starting to happen around what we can do, and so that it is going well. We do want to keep our stakeholder list growing. Some of you go out there yourself and put them in, but you certainly, just as you talk to people, keep those emails coming. You can send them to Jeff or I. And Nina, one of the things we've tasked her with coming on is to go through that stakeholder list. There's lots of organizations listed that don't necessarily have a contact, so I want her to work on getting us contacts with certainly organizations that can help us distribute surveys or have a focus group, et cetera. So anybody that you think, that you think should be on there, because the other part is if these people are residents or work with any residents, we can also, send out email and say, hey, the business survey's online, make sure you do it. Hey, the resident survey's online, or hey, we're having this focus group, so that we get as much input as we can. But the momentum is growing. So thank you so much.
Liza, a quick question on the residents and business surveys. Are we creating any graphics or messaging that we will be sharing with others so that they can promote these? For example, if we get agencies who can put them in newsletters or put them on their social media or get these out, do we have a plan to put any graphics together for them so they don't have to do it on their own?
I heard Rebecca Woodbury was going to do that.
Oh, cool! I'll do it.
I think that's a grand question, and my thought was we would let people know, work through this network and others with our, with the link, but the idea of pre-preparing something that makes it easier is terrific,
yeah,
Rebecca.
just a couple sentences that people can just drop into their newsletters or share on social media will make it super easy. And then on the 27th, actually just today, I scheduled a focus group with all of the public information officers in the county. And so these are public information officers that are from all the cities and towns, but also all the other public agencies. So all the transportation agencies, all of the and MMWD, and it's a pretty wide group. And so that seems like good timing to also say, can you help us promote this survey? And here's the materials.
Rebecca, do you think you need more than a week to put that together? 10 days? What do you? A week? I'll give you a week. And Bruce has his hand up.
Well, first, thank you. Just to say, on what you just said, Rebecca, it would be great if we had something for the 27th or right after. And if it's a few sentences, then I think that certainly work with you to get that done. Sorry, Bruce. Bruce has his hand up.
Just a couple of pieces here. Omar Carrera from the Canal Alliance joined our residents group this week. I just assumed he was going to be part of some other group, so we overlooked it. But the Canal and Omar. Anyway, we had about an hour or two long conversation, and he's offered to do any kind of Spanish translation of any of these surveys. He says oftentimes in the work he's done, oftentimes the questions really need to be interpreted differently as opposed to just formally translated into language. So there's that. Are all these meetings being taped or being videotaped, recorded? And will they be available on the website or the team's website? For Michael, was there any outreach to the residents group participants in your group, which would be Rebecca, which would be Lucy and Stephen? Should they have been part of these focus group conversations? My hope is they should have been.
I'll take those questions, and we're gonna talk about them in a minute. I'm glad that Canal Alliance is working with you, and Bruce, I mentioned we got to sit back down. The resident survey, the business survey that are going online are it's going to reach people who are online. We definitely have to translate and use boots on the ground and community groups to get out a paper version. But I'm gonna move this forward a little bit, because here is after quite a bit of discussion on the organizing with the organizing committee. Here is in terms of here's what we're talking about with deliverables, but I want to answer your questions, Bruce. First, for the work groups, we are asking that they be that those be minutes and a recording for the work group. So like your residents work group, Michael had his work group meeting, and Javier's going to have a work group, et cetera. And that's certainly where the members of the residents team who are volunteering to be part of those will be included. And what do we ask? How do we ask? Who are we going to? What is the timing? Recorded minutes, website for public. When we do the surveys, we are not going to publish every single survey result. And I will tell you why. Some of them have names and addresses and other things that we don't believe we'll get the responses if we made the raw data available. And it doesn't mean things in raw data. So the survey data will be put together as part of the needs assessment, the gap analysis, and the recommendations. For the focus groups, we are not, actually, this is where I wanted to go to. We are not going to tape those meetings. We have a real concern that people will not speak openly on video. We are taking minutes, and we will put those minutes on the team site. What we will put out on the community page to the public is, meeting information and the agenda, what was talked about in a focus group. But again, we don't want people to either not participate if they're off the cuff thoughts, maybe problems they want to bring up. I mean, imagine the police chiefs. They are not going to talk about problems with security on a video that gets put on our public website. But we do want to say these were the meetings held, these were the agendas, here's the groups that were invited. For the focus groups, we want to put the surveys. We can store, like this survey we're doing of the clerks. It's the same survey going to the fire chiefs, et cetera. We can put the survey instrument out there. So we really want to be transparent in what we're doing. We may not always be we may not always post the raw data out for the publish. For the public, it will be on the team site for the ESC. So does that answer your questions, Bruce? Oh, and then you had one more.
Yeah, it answers all the questions. Can we include the residents group representatives in those focus groups going forward?
Bruce, I'm going to be real frank with you because it's the best way to be. It's very, I think yes and no, and I think it's going to depend upon the liaison and who the focus group is. For instance, you have a lot of members of the grand jury. And again, we are limiting like who attended the fire chiefs and the police chiefs focus groups. We didn't even have all of us there because, again, we want people to be very, very open and not feel that what they say is going to be attributed to them. And then there'll be, and end up in the IJ and an editorial about how this city isn't doing what they need to do. Not that your folks would. We don't want the perception of it. So really, for instance, there may be communities where the members from the residents would be part of a focus group. Or there may be different sectors that they would, maybe like in economic development. We aren't probably going to talk about anything that wouldn't be out there anyway. And so I could see the folks that are want to work with economic development being in that group, but there are probably some, it just is going to, squelch some of the discussion and some of the participation. And it's not just your group, it's anybody. We are not making these focus groups open to the world. We're not, like Sarah Jones isn't going just because she's on the organizing committee. We're keeping our participation pretty small.
And I would just add, I think it's really best practices around when you do focus groups, when you do surveys, the more anonymous people feel that they are, the more open they can be. And it results for people in all levels of organizations. When you're talking to, government is very hierarchical. And so in some organizations, you may be talking to people that are lower on the totem pole, but it's tough to get them to open up if they think maybe their boss might know what they said, or, there's just, I think we want to make sure people are as comfortable as possible and as open as possible so we can capture as much information as we can and not have any perceptions out there that might cause somebody to clam up for a variety of different reasons that might cause them to clam up.
And that's the same tact we're going to take when we get boots on the ground in these communities that, like you already are working with Omar from the Canal Alliance. It can be very helpful in getting information from that community where, if Rebecca and I and frankly, Bruce, the three of us went there and started trying to collect surveys, we're not going to be as successful as Omar, who is known in the community, and they feel more comfortable. So we're trying to make it as inclusive as possible. But again, I think participation by the residents on other teams and in the focus groups is really probably going to be looked at more on a case-by-case basis. So there's probably some areas where it will be totally great, fine, open, the more the merrier, and there'll be some where we just have to be sensitive to people wanting to participate.
I just respectfully disagree. You put up a wall between qualified residents and information, and that's generally the problem that the residents have with government, particularly when we declared this was going to be an open and transparent process. I assumed it was going to be that. I can appreciate everything you just said, but the people who we have chosen for this group are qualified. They may be, the fact that they're grand jury members shouldn't disqualify them from being participants in the process. And I would say that you should test it to see whether or not, if you can, test it to see whether or not they are disruptive to that environment. So, otherwise, you're passing along good information to the residents group to say, listen, no, the process was wide open, thoughtful, and the residents ultimately shouldn't wonder whether or not government was doing something in the shadows. I'm not accusing you of that, but that's always what it looks like. But that's just my position. I have to defend the residents.
So I don't know. Can I go, Liza, or?
Oh yeah, you're welcome to say a few things. Yeah.
Okay. So Bruce, I think for me, I totally agree that the transparency and is really important. To me, not being at focus groups has nothing to do with transparency. And in terms of looking at the data, I think for me, our first working group of the government group had 3 members of your group residents out of 12 of us. So 20% or 25% were residents. And when introducing themselves, one of them mentioned the grand jury in their introduction. There was hardly any discussion, as you may have noticed, in that group during our meeting. And to me, a lot of that had to do with other various folks who are at different levels in different government organizations not feeling safe to express what their real concerns and issues are. And so to me, transparency isn't every single thing that's done is somehow posted up on the web, but what we're here to do is make sure we understand what the needs are out there. And so if that means in order to get those needs, certain folks can't be in the room, then to me, that's really important. Otherwise, we're not getting what we need, which is for the purpose of this project. So that's just, and it may be we just have a different perspective on that. But focus groups generally are done, if anyone is watching them, they're done behind glass, mirrored glass, so that people don't, they aren't intimidated. They aren't, they don't feel like that it's anonymous, that it's totally anonymous.
Okay, and Ross, you had your hand up.
Yeah, a similar point in the education community. What I want to get out of this is the best thinking of people who are down in the trenches, who are seeing opportunities and maybe haven't had the opportunity to discuss it with their boss or their boss's boss, and I want those ideas on the table where they can be looked at and considered, and if they're good ideas, raised up. So I'm way more interested in collecting ideas, and maybe good ideas, than I am in accountability for where the idea came from. The idea's got to stand on its own when we get there. So I'm in favor of, not recording everybody's words and having it transcribed and putting it in a journal. I'm more interested in a way that we can filter up the ideas that allow us to be creative. But in this technology world, there are good ideas that are going to go. I mean, if you look at the politics of the incumbent carriers versus government versus private carriers is a huge battle about dollars and revenue and industry. We have to find good ideas to move us away from that stuck point. I want to give the opportunity for those ideas to come forward. So I think not that we're hiding people, but I want to open the door for the ideas. And I think Michael Frank's exactly right. If in doubt, people just don't say anything. And if it was a good idea, we never hear it. So I like the idea of not recording everything.
Sorry,
So
Ross.
I would say, Bruce, thank you for your input, and that's why we have it up here today. And I get what you're saying, and we were trying to figure out some compromises. So, for instance, we're not asking the whole executive steering committee to go to every focus group, and we wouldn't ask all of us to tromp around in Marin City trying to get people to answer surveys. And so, I was using the grand jury as an example of when people start to get nervous. But what I would say, there will be times that it's not a problem. It's very open. Let's do it. Let's all be there. And I saw some part of transparency in that if we say we had the meeting, we should post the survey or the presentation. We post that, the police chiefs were invited or the fire chiefs were invited after it happens. That to me was transparent about the process. You will have access through your role on the ESC to the data so that you can go back to your residents and say, yes, I looked at all the data. But as we take that raw data and turn it into something, you'll be part of it too. But I really think that we're trying to balance that. If you all of you think about it and you think there's a better way, I mean, maybe it's high level notes. We don't attribute anything, but still for some groups, it would just be really scary to put out problems related to accessibility, access and security and plans. And the vendors, the providers are not going to let us publish everything they say. We won't get anything from them. So I think we'll look at it case by case, Bruce, but I appreciate you bringing it up. Everybody should be inviting in those folks to their work group meetings, which there's only been 2 so far. So Michael and you.
Okay, so that's the process. It's the detailed work to get to get the best information from the qualified people, and then that all gets worked up to the work group level, and then the work group will synthesize, if you will, all of that detailed work at that group meeting, and then the residence group participants that's when they'll get updated on the progress of the work group.
Yes, I think you're close in that. There, it will still be case by case review. Is it going to be that the whole work group looks at every survey with every person's name on it and every note that was ever taken at a focus group? That might not be given as much as here's a graph of the data, or here's a map of the data, or here's the consensus from the data. But yes, the idea is to bring data and stories and things back to the work group to say, are we missing something? Did we not ask all the right people? Sorry about that, etc.
Okay.
So yes.
All right. So that's how this whole thing gets pieced together over time, because
yes, definitely.
things are happening at different time frames. Okay.
Yep.
I'm fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah. I mean,
cool.
Okay.
I understand.
Liza, we're a little over schedule for this item.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're all good with that, I just want to quickly say that one more piece on our work groups and our focus groups, we really need to, and especially as we go beyond like government departments, we really need to make sure that we're offering accessible options and language on surveys and things that say if you need a more accessible version of this, etc., let us know. And the email would be digital@marincounty.org. Jeff and I are working with our digital accessibility manager to get that language so we make sure we have it in all the right places. But I just want you to be aware of that. I'm trying to go back here. And I think, Bruce, you just really summed up what was on this slide about outreach deliverables. What we really want to do is start, once we get surveys in, once we get these focus group notes done, is really starting to bring them together, look through them, see what's missing, and then, start to get the input and the data into our needs assessment so that we can work with Magellan on what they found in terms of resources, and we have our needs, and we can do our gap analysis. And then you can see we're not looking for everything everyone said. As we take notes or as you get impressions working with people, it's really, we want to find out about, their availability and cost, the challenges they have, the experience they have, what are their needs, what is the importance of those needs, and who else, like Rebecca said, we can follow up with. So we're not expecting the great American novel. We're there with you all, but we will want some group of people to look at the information, and as we start to massage it and bring out some findings and needs, that they make sense and that we haven't missed something. Okay, we did that slide. And then here is the slide again, but I think after, I appreciate that we couldn't have the meeting 2 weeks ago. This list was sent to I contacted every group to say who from the residence committee wanted to work with your team. So, Bruce, I probably should have let you know I did that. Everybody's gotten the names of folks who are going to work with their team. There's only been 2 work group meetings, yours in government and emergency management, but we are going to be starting the planning, transportation, utilities, public works one soon, and some of these others. So they'll be fit in.
I reached out to Vicki Sievers and gave her an update. I talked to her for about an hour over the weekend.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and Greg, I've known Greg for 20 years, so I figured he has my phone and he'll call me when he's ready.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
Okay.
also, we've reached out to Kingston Cole as well and let him know that we're working on scheduling that working group. So he's in the loop.
Cool. Very good. Thank you all. I think they're going to find that as we get all the rest of the public outreach going in the other communities, that it's going to come all at once and be very, very fast.
Real quick, Kingston Cole is also now part of my group. What do we need to think about that? I mean, we have a lot of people that are in all groups. We're starting to really spread out across that. Is that appropriate, or how should I think about that? Just gave me pause when I saw his name.
For me, I know there's a couple people who are repeated. It'll really depend on their availability. Wouldn't you say, Bruce, that, if there are 2 competing things, Kingston might have to, pick one. The same with Stephen.
If we have to do that, that would be fine. I mean, Kingston is, he wrote a broadband plan for the Marin Telecommunications Agency in 2001. So he has a long history in this space. So if I think we shift people around. We're trying not to overburden the groups, right? And should be able to shift people around based upon how much how much effort they're going to have to put into with that group, and or whether it's appropriate, right? And my goal is just to end up with a 360-degree view of this project and know that there was a method by which that was accomplished, and so that we can pledge to the public once the plan is done that that we took a look at everything and in the end produced a plan that you could audit and find that the groups work together and not against one another. That's my goal.
That'd be that's a great goal. Let's see how far we get.
Right.
No, that's great. And like I said, some communities are going to have work groups and I'll have frequent meetings. Others, Not as much, like we didn't do a work group for the business survey because it was pretty much there. Mike had a few people look at it and we went with Magellan's recommendation, but when we get to economic development, we want to do a focus group. So we'll be, there'll be lots of participation, but it is good that in some of them there are backups. But I think each time we do something, we have to think about who's appropriate to be in the room and how many.
That's fine, yeah.
Great, thank you. In the interest of time, well, actually, our last agenda item is we have provided Magellan with a draft table of contents for the plan. And the reason we did this is our engagement with them is different than a lot of their standard engagements. So far, their plans, if you've read them, they're very detailed and they tend to focus on construction and infrastructure rollout, where we also wanted to consider literacy and equity and devices that people can use, and we're doing much broader outreach than they usually do. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, we came up, Jeff and I worked on a draft table of contents. And so this is in the presentation, we'll send it to you again, but I just wanted to kind of walk through and get your initial feedback, and we can always talk about it again to the plan. I think I'm going to start with the end page, the second page, and then walk back to the specifics. One of the things that we want to do with our plan is make it very digestible, and so that there's in the document, whether you pull it up on the web or you get a document, that it has white space and graphics and pictures, so that it's not it's not 67 pages of single space narrow margin text. We want to have as much as we can on the website so that we're not repeating copious amounts. So like in the plan itself, we probably wouldn't have all the data, all the data pieces of data, all the survey responses, all those things, so that we really can point things to the website for people to see, but still have a plan that makes sense. We want to have those charts and graphs related to Marin County demographics. We have digital divide information that we're finding, our providers, survey findings, et cetera, and so that we can show the data and information we get in ways that are meaningful. We do want to include those stories about challenges and successes and collaborations like we're already doing on our website. We are hearing stories about challenges. We know what some of those are. And so that people really get the sense, again, whether it's a resident or a small business or a teacher, they get that, they listened, they heard our stories. And that as we move forward seeking funding and projects and answers, we humanize that piece of it. And then we want to make sure that the web pages are all in place before we release the written plan. That way we can have them point together. And if you've seen a few communities, what they've done with their website and plan is as projects happen based upon the plan, then those become a web presence and they can track them as a project and see the progress. And we've got this done. We're 50% done. We're doing the things that we said we wanted to do in the plan. So that's kind of the, high level overview. But, and we're also looking at it as I show you these two things, we're looking at a different form. And I've done written plenty of things and, done my master's degree, I had to write 10 papers. And this is not how we wrote them. We want them again to, sorry, Ross. This won't be published in an academic journal. So we can do these with that white space, graphics, charts in mind, that we have an introduction. It's 1 to 2 pages. It really sets the tone and is the beat of it. That then we come up with, show the project and the plan goals, and it can be very, again, very, graphic, and just take the language from the summary and the website so that we're not, regurgitating or creating new information, that we just have a quick summary of the methodology. So again, I've seen them where it's like, here are the 4 things we did. We did an inventory, we did needs assessment, we did gap analysis, and a little explanation, but we can have a detail of the methodology for those who want to read it and really dig in toward the end of the plan. We don't start the plan with that. And then, what are our existing assets? And so we can, again, it can be on a page. I've seen, the plans that make sense where you get a grasp of it, because if we have to read, we're going to lose some folks who really need to get the gist of what the plan is. And then go into strategies. And I put 1 to 3 or 4. I actually think we may end up with 5 or 6 strategies. But the idea of, bold statements to say, this is how we're going to get to our end goal of reliable, fast, accessible, affordable internet for high-speed internet for all. And so then out of those strategies, what are some recommendations? And I'll give you an example. One of the things that Magellan feels already looks like a strategy to them is lead with public safety. Public safety has some big needs. There may be funding resources. They've already got some infrastructure. Public safety could probably push us towards deploying more high-speed internet faster than some other avenues. So that was one of the things they were thinking. And so if you take that out some, you think, okay, lead with public safety, what might be some recommendations or some priorities there? And that's just a sample to tell you kind of how that works. Then we can go into details about the recommendations, details about the methodology, the project administration, how we did, details of findings, and details of gaps. We start with what can be digested. We have get us to the point of, here are the strategies, here are the recommendations, here are what the communities, all the different communities set are priorities. Here's what we're recommending. Here's some project recommendations. Then we can follow that up with the details, and then how do we get here? So I know that was a lot, pretty fast. I tend to talk fast sometimes, but just interested in hearing, and again, this is high-level table of contents, what you all are thinking about this approach.
So one comment, may I?
Yeah, and then Bruce.
Yeah, and this outline describes creating the requirements, the needs definition, and the surveys we've been asked to push out are kind of like, give us an inventory of all the stuff you've got. And in my response to you and Bruce, I basically put a section of questions ahead that says, to the schools, help us understand your requirements, which the existing survey we had missed. And I think that is absolutely critical. I think the future is driven more by clearer defining of requirements than it is even inventorying existing assets. So commend to you that that is now part of the outline. It is a forward-looking define the requirements part of this project. So
yeah, and so Ross, just to again clear this, make it really clear, what's been sent out so far by Magellan is totally their inventory asset questions and service questions. What we'll be doing, you and I and Marin Promise Partnership, once we get in front of Mary Jane Burke, is we'll be saying, what do you need? What do you need? What are your requirements? What are you missing? What are your challenges? All those questions that get at what we've been calling that needs assessment. And so there are really two parts for it. And Magellan has started on their inventory piece because it is a big data lift. They're getting, and they're mapping it, where the needs assessment piece is this public outreach that we're calling it. So it's 2 steps, and some people are going to be contacted twice because they have the infrastructure information, and then they have the, what do I really need? What are my requirements? What are my challenges? What's missing?
so
Information.
What I did in my proposed questionnaire is put those what's your needs question in front and then the inventory behind it, because I think getting people engaged, educators engaged in the dialogue, if you're saying where's the manholes or how many fiber do you have, you don't get a very good answer. If you say what do you need to educate children and then follow it up with where's the manhole, where's the fiber, you're going to get answers. So that my proposal back to Jeff is, and I'll be meeting with Tim Rocco and Sarah to go over those questions and see what they recommend in terms of approach.
Okay.
So anyhow,
we're not wanting.
This is good. Yeah.
We're not wanting to ask the educators about the manholes and stuff. That's why Magellan's going separate. And Jeff, I haven't seen those. So Ross, please include me with Sarah leaving, and as we start to look at that. Oh no, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. But your point's well taken. It's true. That's why we've wanted to separate them. Okay, Bruce, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think just we need to add at least this bit of context to our starting point. We have 3 private carriers, Comcast, AT&T, and Sonic, delivering all services to all elements of Marin County, whether that's government, business, or residences, one or the other, or all three of them. And they are under no obligations to provide service to anywhere or to at any level. That's fully at their, and people can inform me otherwise, but it's completely at their discretion. They're only restricted by local permitting ordinances and regulations, and most of those are controlled by the FCC. So my point, I guess, in saying this is we have to realize that any amount of leverage that we are going to that we think we're going to amass to get any of these organizations to do anything, it seems like that's not something that they respond to very well. And so I think we have to be realistic in the fact that they are not obligated. They're not obligated to put fiber into the canal when AT&T just wired up all of Mill Valley, but nothing in the canal, to my discovery. So just want that out there so that we know when we're. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, and I hope I'm wrong about that, but.
I had 3 other providers that serve Marin County.
So, Bruce, though, I do think you bring up a good point, and I'm actually making a few notes. I think it is going to be important somewhere to talk about or set the context. You said the word context of kind of where we are today, or what's right. The environment today, and also I think that what are the drivers, what are some of the things that are happening? Like there's more money coming available to deploy broadband. We've got to have, we have to have telehealth and students learning from home. And so definitely it's not shown in this outline, but I've written those 2 things down because I do think we don't want to make it so visual that we leave out where are we now? Where are we starting from? Why is this even important? So thank you. Michael, you have your hand up?
I agree with what Bruce is saying. And one of the topics that came up in today's focus group with the fire chiefs, some folks were talking about the satellite, and so it's also what future technology will be out there that will hopefully cause more competition. But Elon Musk and all of the satellite, and those are broadband options that maybe are more appropriate for some of our rural areas or might encourage implementations that those companies wouldn't otherwise pursue.
No, that makes sense also to talk about future technologies, and because we're going to be looking at short-term and long-term recommendations, and we can't spell everything down to the nth degree because technology will change. I think Rebecca and then Ross. Oh, Ross again, but Rebecca.
I'll be super quick just to say, agree with Bruce. I think that it will be interesting to see how we in Marin want to address this. We say internet is as important as other utilities, yet it's being delivered through the market, and that is something that I think the whole world is grappling with in some way, shape, or form. But this internet as a utility concept, what does that look like in Marin? I think is an interesting thing to delve into. So, thank you, Bruce, for bringing that up.
Well, I just added a list of other providers that serve Marin County, both wirelessly and by cable. So hopefully we have a more complete list.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Javier and Magellan have been working on that too. But I think what I took out of Bruce's is that there are 3 kind of major ones in most of the areas, but there are some others playing in the field now. Michael, you had your hand up again?
3-minute warning. Go ahead, Michael.
It's supposed to be 2. Okay, it's supposed to be 2-minute warning. All right. Other thoughts on this? It's not the last time you'll see it, but I just wanted to get us thinking about the end goal. That's why there's a 2-minute warning.
I'll disagree with the table of contents in general. I think the more you can put the recommendations up front and the things that you have in the back, I think I just want to say that I agree with that. We really want to dive into the interesting stuff as soon as possible and not make people wade through too much stuff.
Okay. other thoughts, ideas? Now we're at the 2-minute warning. Actually, my family's being really bad today. I'm gonna have to get on them for the noise, because then that makes the dogs bark. So thank you for the conversation. I really like the thought process around transparency versus getting the data we need, and certainly think more about that. I ask you all too if there's some compromises. I owe you all, some of you, kind of summaries of our discussions and path forward documents. And then and continue to work with Rebecca and I and Jeff, and Nina will be coming on board so that we can help and lead in any way to get these outreach efforts going. We're going to get a little write-up done soon, and we are assuming that the residents and the business surveys will be posted, but I will let all of you know, because it'll be very exciting, and you can help us get the word out. And then, Jeff, our next meeting is moved back to 3, so I want to thank you all for doing it at 4, and it's February 4th, correct? Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last thoughts, statements? All right, stay excited, because it is very exciting, and lots of support out there. All right, bye everybody. I'll turn my
Thank
camera
you.
back on.
Bye. Thank you.
Leaving it.
Bye.
Jeff, can we stay on together for a second?
Who?
Okay.
Jeff
Yeah.
Daniels?
Yes, sure.
Or I guess I could just call you direct, either way.
No, it's the same as it's my teams.
So I sent out a list of people and contacts, and that was kind of on my to-do list, but I never followed up on that. We probably need to get the kickoff going for the ITC group.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any conversations, with Liza about that, or what should I be
No.
thinking of the next step?
No, it's kind of she says, I talk to Javier all the time. Don't worry about that. So I'm kind of out of the loop on her work with you.
Okay. So that means I should talk to her?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll do that. Yeah, frankly, we don't talk about this much. I think we're real, she sees me as being busy and she's trying to protect me about that, but I feel like I need to get going.
Yeah. No, she'd love to talk with you about it. I know that for sure. So.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right. Okay.
All right.
See you around.